WDET is supported by the College of Business Administration at University of Detroit Mercy. UDM's Master of Business Administration is designed to accommodate the career needs of professionals across a variety of work organizations. More information at business.udmercy.edu.
It's the Metro on 1019 WDET. I'm Nick Austin.
And I'm Tia Graham. Today on the program, we'll learn more about what's cooking in Detroit's park systems this summer into the fall with the Detroit Parks Coalition. And we're talking hip-hop and fashion again, this time with a focus on jewelry rappers wear.
But first, on the Metro, if you're trying to buy a home right now, good luck. Home prices are high and interest rates for 30-year mortgages have crossed the 7% threshold and don't appear to be going down anytime soon. But high interest rates are only part of the problem. There's a shortage of homes in Southeast Michigan, and that's increasing prices at a very fast clip. In Metro Detroit, home prices have grown almost 9% in 1 year, outpacing the national rate of 6.4%. And these numbers leave us with questions. What does the real estate market look and feel like for buyers and sellers right now? What would it mean for the market to balance for both sellers and buyers? And what are the housing issues specific to us here in Southeast Michigan? To discuss this, we have two local real estate agents with us. We've got Darren Finley, who's a real estate agent with the Stoneway Group at Good Company Realty in Royal Oak. Darren, welcome to the Metro.
Thank you.
We're also joined by Jeanette Schneider, who's the president of RE/MAX of Southeastern Michigan, which covers Wayne, Oakland, Macomb, and Monroe counties. President Schneider, welcome to the Metro.
Thank you.
Well, Jeanette, let's start with you because this is a big issue that I think is facing a lot of us as we're trying to figure out how to get more people in homes. But you tell us, what does the market look like for you? I mean, what does it look like for both sellers and buyers who are trying to navigate all these issues?
Well, I think for sellers, they probably have a bit of an easier path, at least when it comes to, for most sellers, if you put your home on the market and you've priced it right and it's in good condition, you're not going to have any trouble typically attracting people to be interested in buying. Matter of fact, you're probably going to have a lot of activity. It wouldn't necessarily be out of the norm to have multiple offers, and you're probably going to be able to get it under contract relatively quickly. The challenge is going to come more than likely for a seller when you're looking to buy something else, and then you're going to be in the same camp as all the buyers out there, which is, limited inventory, which is it's a situation we've had for a number of years now, compounded a little bit more recently with higher interest rates and inflation, and so that makes it a little bit tricky when you're on that side of the coin.
Darren, how do you feel about it? Do you have anything else to add there, or is that basically what you're seeing also?
No, she nailed it. I couldn't agree more. Sellers are in a good position, but almost all sellers are also buyers.
Well, that's the thing that I would wonder then. Is that why we're seeing for sellers, they're a little bit reticent, even if they can get a lot of money for their purchase, to say, no, I want to hold on to this? Or is this a situation where you can have speculators who can get in the market that might be causing some of a freeze here too? Start with you, Darren.
Well, that's definitely something that's been newer that we're dealing with. So you mentioned earlier interest rates. A lot of sellers, if you were able to either buy or refinance in the last 4 or 5 years, you captured a very low interest rate. Many people under 3% compared to today's rates of 7%, if not a little higher. That's a big difference. And then the other thing that we've seen over the last maybe 5 years, a major increase in is private equity buying up property. And that is making it harder for your traditional homeowners to find a space in the market because they've got deeper pockets and they have a different long-term plan.
Right, which I think frustrates a lot of folks who are trying to buy a home to get into it, to actually live in it. That's why I want to loop you back in here, Jeanette, because when we look at the things that are contributing to high home prices, I think our idea would be the market would say, well, you're just going to reach a point where eventually people would supposedly start buying. Why is that not happening right now?
Well, I think there's a variety of things, as far as buying. Part of it is, because for the most part, people are employed. So that's usually the starting point. Do I have a job? Am I making enough money, to be able to buy a house? And the answer to that question is pretty unequivocally yes. The next issue comes, can I save money for a home? And that's at the beginning, the tip of the beginning of where some folks are starting to have some trouble with that, given inflation. Inflation's, when it costs more to go to the grocery store, when it costs more to put gas in the car, and just live life on a day-to-day basis and pay bills. And if you don't have anything left over at the end of the month, it makes it incredibly difficult to save for the down payment on a home, to feel comfortable, moving into maybe, making a mortgage payment. And so those are some real issues that are going to need to get resolved, I think, before there's a group of people, a group of buyers, not all buyers, but a group of buyers are going to feel comfortable taking that plunge.
The other thing that we've faced, I think all of us, is that once-in-a-century situation called the COVID-19 pandemic. It's had an effect on so many things. Darren, I wonder for you, would you say that the pandemic has had any effect on the market that we're seeing right now for buyers and sellers?
Oh, so much. The National Association of Realtors loves to spend all of our dues studying anything related to real estate they can. So they put out a report, and I'm going to try to get all the numbers correct here, but if we could return to pre-pandemic build rates, which we're still not at, we would have a 10-year shortage of supply compared to the buyers. Part of this, too, I think, it's a generational thing. I'm either like the oldest millennial on earth or the youngest Gen Z. I was born in 80. I'm like, I am the cutoff.
You are the cutoff.
I bought my first house at 26. I was far from my first friend to buy a home. Most first-time home buyers I take out right now are in their mid-30s. There's about it's maybe no coincidence that these two numbers line up. There's this 10-year gap of people that are just a little bit younger than me that at 28, they didn't care if they were still renting. But at 34, 35, now their life is kind of changing. They're looking for something new. So I think it's, build rates that didn't keep up. And it's also a group of people that waited quite a while, and people are going to college longer. People are waiting longer to really start a lot of things in life. And I think that's had a tremendous impact on, buyers versus inventory.
Well, yeah, but that goes back again to these factors of not only how confident you feel, I guess, in your wallet, in the economy. I mean, that generation of people were dealing with the Great Recession, which didn't strike a lot of confidence in your purchasing power and what would move forward. So it's a completely different market than the Gen Xers that you're referring to there earlier. But another thing I think about with this, Jeanette, as we loop you back into the conversation, is what it would take to get us more stock. You talk about building, for example. What issues are we running into in terms of getting housing stock out there? Do you have any anecdotes or what you're hearing from people? If we need more stock, which is what I'm kind of hearing in this conversation, why aren't we building more of it?
Well, and we definitely need more stock. You're hearing the conversation 100% correctly. Inventory is a major challenge, and to echo a little bit of what was just said is you go back to like the 70s, 400,000 entry level homes were being built a year nationwide. By the year 2020, right as we were going into COVID, only 65,000 entry level homes were being built. As far as new construction. Now, some of the challenges that we've talked about is in the market as a whole is it costs more for builders to build homes, and so they have to get lending to build the home. Anything you put in a home costs more, so the cost to pass that on, that the cost is definitely an issue. But beyond that, there are some other issues. One of them is local ordinances. Our local municipalities, is the state or even at the national level, are they freeing up land or allowing a change in zoning and ordinance to allow housing to be built? And from a politician's perspective, this can be a tricky conversation to have, because in theory, everybody's for affordable housing. That's a great thing to be for, until you start to dig a little deeper and you maybe ask somebody, so you'd be okay if we put an apartment complex with affordable housing or a multifamily units down the street from you? Well, then all of a sudden, maybe it's not in my backyard. Kind of starts to take effect. So zoning and ordinances and things like that play a large role. And like I said, this can be it can be a tricky a conversation for a politician to try to please constituents on. And so in the meantime, it's a great talking point, but not a lot of action seems to get done around it.
We're speaking with Jeanette Schneider, president of RE/MAX of Southeast Michigan, as well as Darren Findley, who's a real estate agent with the Stoneway Group, talking about the current market for real estate, especially for home buyers in this market. And I want to stick with you, Jeanette, because you did bring up a really interesting point, not only about NIMBYism, not in my backyard, but the difficulty it places on politicians who try to pull, or legislators who try to pull different levers to make it easier to build homes. One of the initiatives we heard about at the Mackinac Policy Conference last week, Governor Whitmer proposed a plan to address the shortage of affordable homes. Do you think that this could have an impact, or what kind of impact do you think it would have on the housing market? Or is this just something where more money gets flushed into the system? It keeps inflation rates up. It doesn't actually cause the appreciable impact, just makes it harder. What do you see initiatives like this doing?
I'm going to take any politician, on good faith that they have every intention of this being a good thing. And I mean, and Governor Whitmer and her office certainly seems to understand that this is something that the state needs. The state needs affordable housing. If you want to attract businesses to come here, companies to build here, companies to attract workers need places to live. And so it behooves any state, but especially Michigan, because we're in a competitive climate. There are states that, have maybe more favorable weather, and other things that could attract people elsewhere. So we need this. Time's going to tell how all of this plays out. My hope is that she may not hit the entire home run and quite hit the numbers that she wants for housing units, but hey, if there's some progress made, that will be beneficial to all of us. If she's even able to do a portion of what her plan is, as far as getting some new housing units out there, affordable housing units out there, it'll certainly start to satisfy some of the demands that we're seeing.
Well, Darren, when I think of solutions also, one thing that we hear about, a lot of love for single-family homes in this region, but maybe that's not the most efficient road to go down. Sometimes folks talk about, I don't want an apartment complex necessarily in my backyard. Are those the solutions we should be looking at then, or multi-family units, different ideas? What are you thinking we could do to help with this situation?
So as pricing affects all of us, one thing Jeanette just said a moment ago that I think cannot be overstated. This market's hardest on first-time home buyers. Yeah. If you happen to be lucky enough to have owned a home for 5 or more years, you're going to hold in some of the appreciation. And though this will still hurt, it'll hurt less. But go walk through or drive through any new neighborhood and find me any home being built under $300,000. So there's that. And then to your point, I do not think, if we look at, say, Metro Detroit, there's just simply not enough land to put a 3,000 square foot house on half an acre for every person that wants a house. There's just not. So
right.
We're going to have to look at, multifamily units. You could look at interesting tiny home communities where you're getting more doors per acreage, but we're going to have to start looking at something like that. They're just simply, to take the ultimate extreme, think of Tokyo, right? You cannot put more people on land than will fit. At some point, rubber meets the road.
Well, before we get out of here, Jeanette, I want to give you one more shot at a potential solution, just because, when I think about we don't have enough land, that makes me think out county, what I might say, Detroit, ton of land, right? You could buy land right now if you wanted to. Can you get a house on it? That's the issue. So for that a little bit different of a market, Jeanette, what kind of solutions would you be looking at to help alleviate this pressure?
Well, I'm sorry. Could you say that again? Because I didn't quite. I had a little bit of a cutoff.
Well, certainly. In Detroit, we do have a lot of land that you can purchase relatively low, unlike in a lot of places like a San Francisco or a Tokyo. So for this unique market that's not necessarily like others, what kind of solutions would you be looking at to help out first-time home buyers to help maybe get this market a little bit more balanced for buyers and sellers?
Well, as I say, I could agree with what Derek had just said a couple of seconds ago. Is I think we have to start looking at potentially smaller square footage. And ironically, the Michigan Home Builders Association, in the report that they put out, it kind of shows that trend that new homes are starting to shrink. And I think in part that is due to cost. If we can start to shrink square footage, and tiny homes could be an answer, but I also think we have to be realistic about multifamily housing. And let's talk about the fact that we've got a retail industry that I think think we haven't even begun to scratch the surface on how retail over time is going to change as more and more retail leases, office leases, and other things like that come up as we move forward, because COVID has changed not only housing, but it's changed work environments, it's changed shopping habits. And, it's not necessarily an easy task to take something that was zoned commercial or retail and repurpose it into housing, but there's going to be opportunities there to do something with those spaces.
Jeanette Schneider, president of RE/MAX of Southeast Michigan, and Darren Findley, real estate agent with the Stoneway Group. Thank you so much both for joining us on the Metro.
Metro on 101.9 WDET FM. You just heard from Nick Austin. I'm Tia Graham. Coming up, we'll have a conversation about hip-hop jewelry, an exhibit that's opening up in New York from a Detroiter. You all stay right there.
It's the Metro on 101.9 WDET. I'm Nick Austin.
And I'm Tia Graham. Last year marked 50 years of hip-hop music. Detroit has many musical contributions to the genre. As well, the city also has a significant influence on the culture surrounding hip-hop streetwear. Continuing the celebration of hip-hop is Ice Cold, an exhibition on hip-hop jewelry at the American Museum of Natural History in New York City. On display are notable pieces worn by many artists, like Notorious B.I.G.'s Gold Jesus piece. The exhibit, on display until January of 2025, is based off the book Ice Code, A Hip-Hop Jewelry History by Vikki Tobak. Toback was born in Kazakhstan, but her family moved to Detroit when she was 5 years old. To discuss the exhibit now and Detroit's influence on hip-hop, we have Vikki Tobak here. Vikki, welcome to the Metro.
Hi, Tia. Thanks for having me.
Hello. So, can we talk a little bit about you growing up in Detroit? What music were you listening to at that time?
Oh, my God. I mean, Detroit defined everything about me, I would say, in the music, first and foremost. I grew up in Detroit of the late 80s, early 90s. So I was, hearing a lot of house, Motown, Anita Baker, of course. But yeah, I mean, Detroit is a city that's so rooted in music, and specifically Black music. I mean, that had a big impact on me from the start.
So what influenced you to write about 40 years of hip hop history with, of course, that focus on jewelry and what they wore?
Well, so I've been writing about hip hop for, over 20 years. Mm-hmm. I mean, I mentioned, growing up in Detroit, I was so rooted in music that when I was a teenager and started hearing hip hop, in Detroit still, I decided, to move to New York. I worked for a record label that had Gang Starr and Jay-Z and a lot of early, golden era hip hop artists on it, and started writing about the music. And, with hip hop, you can't really separate what it looks like and all the style connotations from the music. So, style is like the visual dialogue of hip hop. So I decided to focus on this very specific part of it, which is the jewelry, which talks so much about who you are, where you're from, what you want to say about yourself, all those things that hip hop does, but through the jewelry.
So you write about jewelry and styles being unique to U.S. cities throughout the book. What trends did Detroit set?
Oh, my God. I mean, Detroit is it. Detroit set so many style trends. With jewelry specifically, of course, you have the Cardis, the Cartiers, glasses, the buffs. That was really specific to Detroit, of course, but Detroit also had so many kind of local jewelry stores that were important to the artists that came up there, like Cash Doll, like Big Sean, like, T Grizzly, like so many artists were really rooted in the kind of jewelry that was being made locally. So, but I would say, definitely like the Cartier glasses are something that Detroit, does bigger and better than anyone else. And just style on a whole different level. I would say, Detroit's got it.
And Vikki, we talked a little bit earlier about the significance of Northland Mall, especially going and buying jewelry from Northland Mall, or just some of the other places in that area, like Greenfield Plaza, some of the famous jewelers here like Hutch, who recently passed away, unfortunately. So when we think about that, talk about the significance there that those spaces and places played in that hip hop culture.
You're exactly right. I mean, I grew up in Oak Park. My family was an immigrant family that, came up in Oak Park. We could walk to Mr. Allen's Shoes. We could take the bus down Greenfield to go to Northland Mall, which I did often. And in fact, that there was a jewelry store in Northland Mall. I don't remember the name, but my mom, for whatever reason, had bought me a little Nefertiti pendant from there and was like, this, hold on to this for the rest of your life. This is going to, we grew up in, Northgate Apartments. And so, those kind of local jewelry stores were everything. And the places and spaces of Detroit really informs memories, right? And who you are and kind of the kind of jewelry that you choose to put on your body. I mean, that's such a shared part of humanity. And so that was a big influence on me. And I write about that, in the book, Ice Cold, which the exhibit is based on. And I write a lot about, those early days at Northland Mall and going and seeing the jewelry, and then, writing, of course, about Hutch's jewelry, which made a lot of Cash Doll's jewelry in the book. And so Detroit, again, just played such a big, part. And in fact, I have a lot of friends listening, shout out Eric and Glenda and Lido. Yeah, they were all excited. And they're like, you have to share the Northland stories.
Yes. I love that so much. Vikki Tobak is the author of Ice Cold, which is now an exhibit at the American Museum of Natural History in New York City. And we're here just chatting a little bit about that exhibit and the book, of course, and memories. And we were, of course, talking a little bit yesterday, and you mentioned, we were talking just about the idea of having the glasses, the buffs, the Cardis, and the culture surrounding them. You know where you are when you're wearing them, if you should wear them when you're in a certain space or a place, or they may, no longer be on your face. So you talk a little bit about what was instituted in schools during that time surrounding jewelry and the things that you wore.
Yeah, well, of course, like with hip hop jewelry, you can't separate it from this bigger narrative, right, of politics and race and identity and that sort of historical complexity that you have. So, I talk about the jewelry being, this form of royalty and adornment, but the flip side of it is that oftentimes people are in danger or in a position to get your chain snatched, if you will, and especially in hip hop. I mean, that's such a big sign of disrespect. And used, also almost as a weapon in itself. So, a lot of schools, back in the day, not just in Detroit, but also, in parts of Brooklyn and, all over the country, thought that, banning jewelry would be a way to, protect the students and, not give cause for that kind of stuff. And I have a photo in the book, there's a high school principal out of Brooklyn who, made a giant sign like no gold, no ball chains, no Nefertiti pendants, none of it, as a way, I guess, to protect students. So that is the flip side for sure of being in a position, of status where you can adorn yourself or, be that person out in the world.
So the exhibit's going to be up until 2025 January. What are some things that people can expect to see on display? Some of the jewelry, some of the other artists that are going to be represented. I know that we are possibly going to see featured Biggie Smalls, of course, but T Grizzly, a few other Detroit artists are featured there.
So the Detroit artist that we have representing is Big Sean. Mm-hmm. We have his lion pendant in the show. But yeah, we also have Biggie's Jesus pendant, which is, such a piece of iconography. We have Beyonce's nail rings. We, of course, have, the Rockefeller pendant. We also have Ghostface's eagle cuff, which has been a huge draw. But yeah, we have stuff from artists, as early as the 1980s, Biz Markie, Run DMC. I mean, they were so known for setting the jewelry trends. Slick Rick. We have his crown and his eye patch in the show. Then, we had artists like Nas loan us his QB pendant, which, is really representative of the neighborhood that he came from. Nicki Minaj's Barbie pendant. And then right on down to current day, we have, I mentioned Big Sean, but also Tyler, the Creator, lent us some pieces, A$AP Rocky, and Ferg, of course. They're all known as kind of the contemporary, jewelry collectors. So we have pieces in the show from all of them. And yeah, it's up through January 2025. So hopefully, Detroit is just a hop skip from New York. So if people want to make the trip, they'll be able to see all of that.
And is there any chance we can see Ice Cold exhibit on the road in Detroit, or same thing with your book, Contact High, A Visual History of Hip Hop? Will we see those exhibits traveling anytime soon?
Yeah, well, for sure. You mentioned Contact High. For sure, it's been my longtime dream to bring it to, my city that I'm from. And that's going to be on the road next year. But Ice Cold, well, TBD, it's really hard to get the artists to loan their pieces for that long just because they still wear them. They still perform in them. So they're like, so I would love to put it on the road. So let's see. Yeah, if the artists are down for me to keep the jewelry for that long, I would love it.
I think all the artists are actually listening right now. They're all, the ones who are still living with us right now are listening, and they're definitely going to say yes to that. So we're just going to throw that out there in the universe, Vikki, and let that happen.
We're going to manifest.
Yeah. So Vikki Tobak is the author of Ice Cold, which is now an exhibit at the American Museum of Natural History on display until January of 2025. Thank you so much for joining us. And next time you're in Detroit, we'll have to have you in studio.
Of course. It's my pleasure. Thank you.
It's the Metro on 1019 WDET. That's Tia Graham. I am Nick Austin. And coming up, we'll hear about why the University of Michigan Health is building a medical facility in Troy.
On 1019 WDET FM. I'm Tia Graham.
I am Nick Austin. Here hanging out with you, Tia. But, one of the things we did, maybe I didn't get a chance to hang out with you quite as much as I normally do, because last week we were up at the Mackinac Policy Conference. By the way, thank you for holding it down back here at home. That was very cute.
Yeah, and you guys were living it up,
I don't know if we were living it. They're talking policy and all of this interesting stuff. But one of the things we did learn about, because the benefit of being up there is having so many people in the same place at the same time, is hearing about some of the news coming out and really getting to talk to some of the decision makers behind some of the big things happening in town. One of those big deals is in March, the University of Michigan Health announced plans to purchase over 7 acres of land in Troy to build a new medical center. The incoming multi-specialty center, as they refer to it, will include ambulatory surgical services and work for some cancer treatments. As I mentioned while we were up there, I had a chance to speak with Dr. David C. Miller, who's the president of UM Health, to learn more about this $4.4 million purchase. To start the interview, I asked David to help us understand why Michigan Health is expanding into Troy with the new facility.
We view ourselves as a statewide institution. Our mission is to advance health to serve Michigan and the world. And we think the specialty services, the high quality care from Michigan medicine, we wanted to look for creative ways to allow as many patients to access that as close to home as possible. Right care, right place, right time. And so over the last 5 to 10 years, we have been growing new partnerships in West Michigan and Mid Michigan. And our presence in Oakland County, which we're grateful for and looking forward to, is an extension of that. We know there are about 180,000 patients every year from Oakland, Macomb, or Wayne County who come to Ann Arbor for diagnostic evaluations, treatment recommendations. We think this allows their treatments to be delivered closer to home. The drive from Ann Arbor to Oakland County is not simple. Can make treatment plans harder, and we're grateful for the opportunity to be a bit closer.
You mentioned ambulatory surgical services, some cancer treatments. What are some of the other things people can expect from this facility, and why do you think it's important for it to be closer to them in Troy?
Yeah, thanks. A great question. And I think if you look holistically, this particular facility is likely to be more focused on adult services. But I want to mention, importantly, in Oakland County, we have a very strong partnership with Trinity Health, bringing specialty pediatric services into the community as well. So if we pivot back to the new facility planned in Troy, you mentioned a couple key areas. One is advanced diagnostic imaging. Many patients who make their way to University of Michigan Health have conditions that require repetitive follow-up imaging, and having to drive way over into Washtenaw County, for instance, to get that, we think those advanced imaging services will be helpful. Cancer is another area that, follow-up treatments, whether radiation therapy or chemotherapy, being able to get those closer to home. And then we're looking at a number of other advanced specialty services, perhaps work in areas of musculoskeletal care, reproductive endocrinology. These are some areas that we're contemplating as we look to finalize the programs that'll be present in Troy.
And I look at the news stories about hospitals recently. The things that I hear about are hospitals closing, yet you're opening a facility in Troy that would go against this kind of general perception of what the market seems to be bearing out right now. So why would you say that you guys are able to open this new facility and it's a good idea when we see so many closures?
Yeah, thanks. It's a great question. And, I will say this facility is really an outpatient facility, although it will have ambulatory or outpatient surgery capabilities. But we are building a new hospital in Ann Arbor as we speak right now that'll open in a year and a half. And I think one of the key points is really the demand for the services at Michigan Medicine. In Ann Arbor, our facilities are very busy. For lack of a better term, our hospital is at 95 to 98% occupancy. There's a demand for our services that I think the solution is for us to get closer to communities where that demand exists. And so I think it's a reflection of the outstanding quality of care provided by our teams every day and our position in the state as a statewide resource. We want to get closer to communities as much as we can.
Yes, and one of the largest communities, right? Detroit, largest population in the state, the Tri-County area. So Troy and Oakland, it's closer, but why was it Troy the decision as the location as opposed to maybe someplace a little bit closer to Detroit?
Right. Great question. And as you know, there's been a lot of discussion here at the conference broadly about strong collaborations between the University of Michigan and the city of Detroit, including the Detroit Innovation Center. And some of the decision making related to the site reflects looking understandably at where patients come currently to receive our services and how we can get as close as possible. There were some considerations just in the selection of a site from a real estate perspective, but our commitment to meeting the needs and serving patient populations throughout the Tri-County area, Wayne County, including Detroit, Oakland County, and Macomb. This will be part of that solution as we continue, again, more services as close to the patients as we can in their communities.
You mentioned that this is about diagnostic services, more of a diagnostic facility, though there is the hospital opening. You mentioned also in Ann Arbor. Leads me to think a little bit about your expansion efforts right now, right? Are we looking at maybe more opportunities to open closer to Detroit, or are you going to have to look and see how this works in Troy? What else are you looking at doing in terms of possibly expansion in the future?
Yeah, thanks. Great question. And, in the facility in Troy, while we see both those diagnostic services, we will have a lot of therapies there as well. And so really want to see the whole spectrum. When we look out, again, I'll come back to our focus as a statewide resource. We're very interested in understanding where additional partnerships make sense to impact health across the state. And so while we don't have anything imminently planned, we're continuing to evaluate where additional partnerships may make sense. Yeah. Good news is in the state of Michigan, there's a lot of great grade healthcare. We think we're an important part of that.
Right. Well, hopefully I won't need diagnostic services anytime soon, but just in case I do, Troy might be a good place to go. How soon will the facility be up and running?
Absolutely. We're anticipating 2027, sometime in 2027. So a couple years still, but a lot between now and then, but a lot of excitement along the way.
So you're telling me to keep it nice and easy, keep it safe, right. Nick. You got to take a little bit of time, but 2027, all bets are off.
There we go. Exactly.
Right. Again, Dr. David Miller, University of Michigan Health President, thank you so much for joining us on WDET.
Thank you, Nick. Appreciate it very much, and go blue.
Yeah, you can listen to more of WDET's special coverage of the 2024 Mackinac Policy Conference online at WDET.org/MPC. This is the Metro.
It is the Metro on 1019 WDET. I'm Nick Austin alongside Tia Graham, who I'm sure is still feeling it from that Go Blue. Such restraint, Tia, you exercise there.
Professionalism, Spartans will show professionalism.
You've exhibited it right now, and education, right? That's where you got yours from, Michigan State University. But Michigan's public education system, that feeds into our undergraduate system, it's still not doing as well as we want to right now, ranking 41 out of 50 according to the U.S. News and World Report. And while Governor Gretchen Whitmer has invested a historic amount in the state's K through 12 education system, there are a lot of others working to improve the way kids learn in classrooms. Launch Michigan President and CEO Vanessa Kiesler spoke with WDET's Russ McNamara on Mackinac Island about what the nonprofit does and what it's doing to improve the state's education system.
What Launch has done is looked at what leading states have done to turn around their education system. And those really fall into three things. There's three pillars. Responsibility, so our governance system; resources, so fully funding the system; and then reinventing what a high school diploma means for all Michigan students.
Yeah, so it kind of all starts with money, in my eyes. What are you doing for funding? What is the overall plan for funding?
So I think with education, it's often been this conversation of, do we need more money or do we not need more money? And the answer is yes, and yes, we need more money, but we need it for the right things. For best practices, proven practices, and we also need to make sure that we are using it efficiently. So when we're putting money into the system, that it's getting to kids in classrooms, that it's going for what it was intended for. So it's about more money, but it's about money for the right things with the right kind of performance management so that it's spent with the integrity and the purpose that's meant for.
Is this an idea of treating every district differently, to fulfill their needs? Because what is a problem in one district might not be a problem in another one.
Yeah, it's important to have base funding for all districts, but then tiered funding, or in Michigan we're calling it the Opportunity Index. Other states use it as well, because not every district has the same challenges and not all kids have the same challenges. So it is about a more flexible funding model to make sure that we're meeting kids where they're at and that they're getting what they need from the education system.
Launch Michigan was informed by the Growing Michigan Together Council. What kind of lessons were you able to glean from that informs the way you've set up Launch Michigan?
Yeah, the Growing Michigan Together Council report was really, really important for us because it came to many of the same conclusions that are in the Launch framework. So when they did, a similar scan of leading states, they looked at the data and they said, we need many of the same pieces that Launch is calling for. So for example, the GMTC calls for the Michigan Education Guarantee, which is ensuring PK through 14 for all of our students, and then in K-12, ensuring Michigan students graduate with the future-ready skills and competencies they need to be successful, which is exactly aligned with what Launch calls for, a meaningful high school diploma with those 21st century skills. So it's great to know that when we look at the problem from two different groups, we come to similar conclusions, and I think that helps us triangulate for those shared solutions and make sure we're pushing toward those.
What kind of buy-in do you have from school administrators and teachers so far?
The Launch board includes the MEA is on our board, so Michigan Education Association, and we work closely with the Michigan Association of School Administrators, that's Tina Kerr. And we're spending a lot of time working with the education community. Launch is a disruptor, so we have to call for change, and that sometimes maybe we're saying things that are a little hard to hear. But I found the ed community willing to, they want what's best for kids. We all want what's best for our students. We want them to be able to graduate and have a good job and have a good life. Sometimes our methods or how we think about it is different, but we share that North Star of we want this to be better for kids. And so I think there's good collaboration. We're fostering good collaboration with our partners across all of the different areas.
So you've got the teachers and the administrators on board. How about legislators, the ones that would kind of be able to change the architecture and direct that funding where you want it to go?
Yeah. Launch is really appreciated. We've had good partnerships with legislators right now. We're having ongoing conversations with people on both sides of the aisle about funding, but about the standards too, that performance standard, the Michigan Education Guarantee, what that looks like, and how Launch can support them. Again, we are here for the long term, so while administrations or politics might change, education reform needs to take place over a number of years, and Launch wants to help keep on the same path regardless of who's in the chair at that moment, and build those relationships that can last.
That was WDET's Russ McNamara speaking with Launch Michigan President Vanessa Kiesler on Mackinac Island last week.
This is the Metro on 101.9 WDET FM. Today will heat up with a high of 85 degrees and partly cloudy. Tomorrow there's an expected thunderstorm. Temperatures could reach 79 degrees. Speaking of weather, coming up we'll talk about what's new in Detroit's parks system this summer with the Detroit Parks Coalition. Stay right there.
It's the Metro on 101.9 WDET. I'm Nick Austin.
And I'm Tia Graham. The warm weather months in Michigan can be magical for some. And for me personally, it's one of my favorite times about being from Detroit, the way it comes alive with people and activities in the summertime. And of course, you could see and participate in some of these summer activities through the city's park system. The Detroit Parks Coalition has been working for nearly 2 decades to maintain parks in Detroit. And the DPC is held together by park leaders and community advocates. Joining us now on the Metro to chat about the summer lineup and what the park system means to its residents is Yvette Pullom-Bass. Yvette is the program director for the Detroit Parks Coalition, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me, Tia and Nick.
Yeah. So what have you learned in that time being with the organization in terms of park usage and the things that you're seeing with the residents?
Okay. So the Detroit Parks Coalition, we're actually a new organization.
All right.
Just 2 years old.
Just 2, so not decades, just 2.
Right. However, the organization which comprised the coalition, Clark Park Coalition being the oldest, they've been around since 1991.
All right.
And so we kind of run the gamut. The coalition itself, we are comprised of 11 park stewardship organizations in the city. These would be what the city considers the destination parks or regional parks. So you got the Clark, Chandler, Palmer, Rouge, Belle Isle. We also have the Riverfront Conservancy and DDP, Belle Isle. So yeah, and they are all park stewardship organizations, and we support them, the coalition.
Yeah. So the coalition being together for just 2 years, not 2 decades. So you come together for 2 years, and this is like-minded community leaders, of course, and advocates deciding, let's just put our resources together. Let's put our brains together and see what we can do for our residents in the city. So with this 2-year coalition now, what have you all decided to come to put together?
All right. So we have some shared programming that we do across the city. One thing we do is yoga in the parks. It just started June 1st. It's going to run through September 1st. So that's one thing we do. We also have a partnership with the Detroit Pistons Foundation, our Pistons Neighbors program. So we are in 12 parks this summer offering free programming to everyone. The programming kind of runs the gamuts from yoga, gardening, Tai Chi, environmental education. It depends on the park.
It depends on the park. which I love so much about the city of Detroit. Are you a native Detroiter?
I am a native, born and raised.
West Side, East Side?
West Side.
All right, what part?
I think I'm an honorary East Side.
Okay. I'm starting to feel the same way now. I'm on the East Side now for almost 2 years. I feel the same way. I'm feeling that. But there are just so many different groups that have been putting in work, like you just mentioned a few of them. What are the specific benefits of having this coalition and working with the groups together?
So together, when you are we're a nonprofit, so a lot of it is fundraising, and it's just better to do things collectively and collaboratively. So when we are doing our fundraising, when we're doing our promotion and marketing, we support all the park organizations. Everyone supports each other. So we're not just putting out the programs that's going on at one park, right? Each park is promoting each other. We come out and support each other's events. And again, it's from a fundraising perspective, it's just better to come and say, hey, we want to get funding for 11 parks opposed to just as 1 or 2 parks, right? And that's really kind of how we got started. The philanthropic organizations, like, maybe you guys should come together, because we're getting requests from, all of these organizations. So maybe you all could do a joint request. And so our board chair, Alex Allen, he's the president and CEO of the Chandler Park Conservancy. We kind of reconvened a group of park stewardship organizations. The founding 5 were Chandler, Palmer, Clark, Belle Isle, and Rouge, right? And then the others came on board. And the latest one is the O'Hare Park Community Association.
Yeah, so you all are continuing to build and seeing more parks and associations added every single year, which is great. And once again, just being a native Detroiter, once again, we're speaking with Yvette Pullom-Bass. Yvette is the program director for the Detroit Parks Coalition. So we, once again, think about being a native Detroiter, born and raised here, and driving through the city and just seeing the upgrades and seeing the park system, honestly, life again, seeing kids on the playgrounds again and families. It's something beautiful to see. Like I say, it's a magical thing to see right now. So, what work right now do you see being done with city officials and the city department that is promoting this?
So there has been a lot of great things happening in the parks in the city. So District 4 East Side, right? Chandler Park is the regional park in that district. And so the city, they're currently using ARPA funding and putting in a rec center, which District 4 had never had a rec center. I'm going to say never, but I've probably been working over there for about 10 years and we didn't have a rec center.
Yeah.
So that's one great thing. D4 will have a rec center. Also the city, they're putting in greenways and paths and trails. Also doing some repavement over at Eliza Howe Park. So anybody ever been to Eliza Howe? That road was kind of bumpy.
Kind of, yes.
So yeah, so now it's really smooth, newly paved. And in just about most parks, we're getting new shelters, playscapes. The city, they've been investing a lot into the park system, in addition to what the park stewardship organizations have been doing.
And I think about, of course, just the different things that you all have been able to do just in 2 years with some of the things that we're seeing in the city of Detroit, at the parks, like you said, yoga in the park and so many other things that are happening. What, if you can't get into it, what is the re-grant program with Kresge?
All right, so the Kresge Re-Grant Program is giving park stewardship organizations. So this year we were able to award 10 grants totaling about $130,000 to park stewardship organizations. And basically they had it all time, and they submitted an application, right? And they're basically saying these are the programs that we want to run throughout the summer or the events that we want to host. So we have Gordon Park. We're actually going to be at Yates Park this summer. They'll be doing a Juneteenth event, right? We have Ella Fitzgerald Park, who will be doing some literacy in the park. Rouge Park, they're going to be doing a Rhythm and Rouge event. So they submitted applications, a very competitive process. We got a lot of really, really great applications. And so basically this is giving them the opportunity to fund the events and programs that they vetted the community and asked, like, what do you want to see? Or these are things that the members in our community would like to see in the parks. And so they submitted the application and we went through the review. It was a really, really, really tough situation. But we were able to put funding in every district in the city this year. So all the information is on our website, DetroitParksCoalition.com. Additionally, We just launched our event calendar. So if there are park stewardship organizations or block clubs who will be doing events this summer, they could go onto our website, DetroitParksCoalition.com, go to events calendar, and they could add their events to the calendar. And it's just free marketing, promotion, and everybody supporting each other.
Thank you so much for that so much. That was Yvette Pullom-Bass. Yvette is the program director for the Detroit Parks Coalition. You just heard where you can find out more about what's happening in our city parks. Thank you so much for joining us on the Metro.
Thank you for having me.
I'm super excited about what's going on at Rouge Park. That was my neighborhood park. That's the Metro for Tuesday, June 4th. You can listen to recent episodes online at WDET.org and make sure to subscribe to the podcast on your favorite platform.
The show is produced by Sam Corey, David Lyons, and Jack Philbrandt. Our engineer is Nate Bender. Our assistant producers are Anel Scott and Sydney Walkley.
The Metro is a production of WDET, a listener-supported service of Wayne State University. And if you like what you hear and want to support the Metro, consider becoming a member at WDET.org/donate.
This is WDET-FM, Detroit Public Radio, your connection to news, music, and conversation. Thanks for listening.
WDET is supported by the College of Business Administration at University of Detroit Mercy. UDM is offering a new master's degree in ethical leadership focused on sustainable, ethical, and inclusive problem solving. More information at business.udmercy.edu.